Is that so? This is Bob Clarkson. Is what so? Well, let's consider today. I got a word from a couple of people recently, and one was a woman named Kathy, and she loves scriptures that make her think that God is mean. And she wants to hear messages along that line, and she goes to a church where her pastor kind of preaches from that perspective. Sinners in the hand of an angry God. And she actually uses scripture as a whip to keep herself on the road, to keep herself on the straight and narrow, to stay between the moral lines and the restrictive lines and the code of the law that God gave to Moses and he gave to the people. She thinks she must obey God or else God will get her. And she kind of revels in that and saturates herself with that perspective. And again, all of us who go to church have chosen our place of worship. And we choose a place of worship that satisfies our image or how we want God to be for whatever our reasons. And if we don't find it in one church, we'll shop until we do. I remember there's a time in my life I would move from one part of the country to somewhere way far away and then somewhere else, and I would always try to find a church that was very similar to the one I left, and sometimes I'd say, wow, this is cool. God helped me find a church that was just like the one I just left. I didn't realize how stale, how small that made God or my understanding of the whole Christian faith. But I was proud I could find another one like the one I left. And I always went to big churches, mega churches, thousands of people in membership. You know, a lot of safety in numbers, big programs, a lot of fun stuff, very good things for the kids. So we may choose a church because it's more like an amusement park or a circus for our kids. We may choose a church because the pastor's real sweet and rippy, whatever. So then I had this other woman, and her name was Mary, and she said she's petrified by thinking of God and as one who might have a side that is very strict and firm. She does not like to think of God as expressing wrath toward her. Well, there are a lot of people who want to worship in a church where God's all lovey-dovey and we have blessing services and all sorts of feely-goody things. And that's fine. And we find churches like that out there and we can plug in. But there we find that the reality for us is more about God being defined by us rather than defined by himself and his own word. Now, scriptures do talk about God being a God of wrath, and he says very clearly, vengeance is mine, I will repay, which means he's going to mete out his vengeance at some point against the things that he hates. But when we're talking about God's wrath or God's love, let's step back and look at that from a perspective of what is love in the first place. 1 John says God is love. Doesn't just have it, he is love personified. Well, where does wrath come in a paradigm that is laced with love? Where does behavior management come in a paradigm that's laced with love? Where does dutiful service come in a paradigm that's supposedly laced with love? Because if God is love, not just has it, he is the essence of love, which is the highest, purest, most beautiful of all emotions that exist, then what's the wrath about? Well, so we're going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about what God's wrath is about, but we're also going to talk about the fact that we're so often drawn to the extremes. We have a divide in our current political scenario where it's absolute venomous anger and hatreds between the two political persuasions that dominate the landscape of our politics. What's that about? There was a time when the people on each side of the aisle would cooperate with each other, and when there was a president shift from one of those parties to the other, we respected the office enough to, as members of the party that didn't win the election, to support the president and treat the office with the respect it deserved and the man who sat in the chair. Now, the best way to actually have community is to allow for diversity in a way that we embrace the adversity, we enjoy the variety, and we don't make it a point of division, separation, hatred, and meanness. Well, why do we go to the extremes? Well, I've often heard that if the pendulum has swung to one extreme in a society, that sometimes it takes the swing almost to the opposite extreme to bring things back to the middle. And I would say that's true as the pendulum swings, if you notice, as it slows down, as it slows down, as it slows down. Where does it settle? In the middle. In the middle. Now, we don't want to be devoid of intense feelings of things that are important to us. That's part of our nature. We want to feel that there's something important enough that we can get on the bandwagon and support the cause. Now, most of us have a reasonable measure of compassion. From the worst criminals to the highest saints or religious leaders in the world, compassion is in the heart of all. Now, the criminals have compassion for other criminals. The very religious have compassion for a lot of people below them and some people equal to them. But we're talking about compassion is a natural part of the human organism and our constitution. We have a spirit which chooses, which wants to do things, a basic desire system. We have emotions which we feel when someone either agrees with or disagrees with in varying degrees what we have chosen to believe. And then when those emotions are struck, and either positive or negative, the more extreme the hurt of that particular emotion, the more extreme the resulting expression. But there's that third layer, which is my thinking. When I get offended by somebody, my mind goes into the offense bucket, walks into the laboratory of all the defense tools and experiments, and comes up with the best experiment or the best tool and its use to get back at the one who hurt the feeling. Of course, hurt feelings are a whole other issue, but I'm going to throw at least this part on the table. You cannot hurt my feelings, ever. No one on this earth can hurt my feelings, ever. I'm not even sure God could hurt my feelings. Why? Because people hurting my feelings is not them doing it, it's me doing it. My feelings and your feelings are hurt by choice. When someone says something offensive to the whole room full of people, I can choose not to be offended and say, I don't care, and legitimately not care, and therefore what I might have felt as hurt if I did care, I don't care about their opinion of me. I don't care about their opinion on that particular topic. I can disassociate myself from the expression that would have formerly caused me hurt, because I now know that I can manage all hurt by specifically rejecting the notion that I'm going to give you the power over my feelings enough that you can hurt them. So, if you want to solve your hurt feelings issues, own them. Now, we've talked before about, if someone is speaking to a group of a dozen people and only one gets hurt feelings out of it, then there's obviously something different in the one that isn't in the other 11. Okay, that's logical. That's easy to follow. But then we're constantly preaching from pulpits and lecterns and teaching spaces that it's wrong to hurt other people's feelings. Well, when I realized I couldn't, and that you couldn't hurt mine unless I let you, that I have the control and you have the control that determines who and what hurts your feelings, and was I set free. I released a lot of that stuff. A lot of my pain was over wanting people to have a high opinion of me, and they didn't, and when they didn't, that hurt. Well, and oftentimes the opinion is expressed in whether they agree with something I believe. That's part of the opinion definition sequence. It's like, okay. So we're drawn to the extremes because we actually like skiing down a mountain where we could crash into a tree. Or we love going to an amusement park where we're on a ride that, our stomach is up there and we're down here and we're thinking, whoa, and it's scary as heck, but we love it. We love the thrill of the extreme that's a safe extreme. We hate the fear that comes with the extreme that we can't control, that doesn't necessarily have safe margins. It's like, okay. But we still go to the extremes because that's what gives us the greatest pleasure or the greatest pain. And to live a deadpan, middle of the road, the pendulum finally stopped at the middle of the bottom, doesn't feel anything, probably apathy is one of the least desirable states of any human out there. I care that somebody cares. I care deeply about that somebody cares. The cool thing is we have an option that if nobody on the planet cares, the God of the universe, who is more valuable than all of the billions of people who have lived so far on earth, and he loves you and he loves me with that enormity of love that we can't comprehend. The more you are loved, the happier you are. The more you are loved, the more secure you feel. And it's that security that at the amusement park lets us enjoy the thrill of a scary ride, because we know the safety rules under which that amusement park has to abide and maintain its equipment. We're not going to get hurt, but we're going to feel close. Same with the fear side of this thing. But we gravitate to the extremes because that's where the real meat of the human experience is. That's where the thrill is. We take trips, we go on cruises, we do all sorts of things to entertain ourselves, and they're all about fascination and fear and excitement and something really dramatically better than the mundane routine of our everyday life. Well, let's go back to those original two, Kathy and Mary, okay? What you think about God is the most important thing in your life. And it's the most important thing for eternity, but it's the most important thing in your life, too, what you think about God. Again, if you want to think he's a mean ogre, then no matter what he does, you're going to see him as a mean ogre, so he might as well be one. But if you want him to be mean, he'll be mean by your own receptivity. So I think the primary reason Christians tend toward extremes is that most preachers gravitate to one extreme or the other, and they preach their extreme. And again, we choose the church that has the preacher that makes us feel how we want to feel when we leave. If you want to feel touchy-feely good God, you're going to find a pastor that'll be a touchy-feely good God preacher, and so on. Unfortunately, most gravitate toward the mean, angry God. Most Christians that I have ever met, most Christians in the churches that I think are the most intentional about being in connection with God in relationship and being obedient to the desires of God, are doing most of their obedience and most of their service out of a fear of not doing them, rather than, I love him so much I can't help it. I love him so much I can't not do this. Think about your most significant other. Flowers are expensive and a terrible waste. Oh, no, they aren't a terrible waste. You spend a fortune on a bouquet of flowers and you send it to your wife, and everybody in the workplace where she works is jealous of the husband that loved his wife enough to send this magnificent display of beauty. Oh, it was worth $100. Because when she gets home, I'm going to get some hugs and kisses out of that, probably. Unless there's something wrong with her. Well, that's the way it is with God. He says, don't do what you have for me because you have to. Bring me flowers because you care enough to want to. And so we'll gravitate toward the church that has the pastor that drills it in. But most churches, most pastors, most theologians define the gospel as written by Paul the apostle, and his books from and Luke, I guess, helped, from Acts down through the Revelation, and then John's in there and Peter. But most of that stuff is from Paul, and Paul is constantly warning the people, don't walk in the flesh, walk in the Spirit. He's constantly reminding Christians who are falling off the wagon, and now they're saved so they can get away with stuff, not to abuse the grace of God. And we tend to gravitate toward the manageable, measurable stuff. So we define the gospel as Paul preaching against doing wrong stuff, living a holy life instead of a dirty, unrighteous, selfish life, and so on. But the gospel was really lived and written about in the Gospels of Jesus Christ, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. When I realized how much I was following the negativism of what was being stressed in the Pauline epistles, by the way, he also expressed grace and understood it better than anyone else that's ever lived because of his encounter on the road to Damascus. But it's like we end up believing a gospel that's a behavior management system, which is like every other religion in the world, which makes it really not the gospel of Jesus. But in the gospels that show the life of Christ, he was constantly hanging out with the ne'er-do-wells, the people who were down and out, the people who were doing the wrong stuff, and he forgave people that the Pharisees wanted to stone. The really righteous people of the religion of God himself. The Israelites. Okay. Well, when I got sick and tired of cowering before God and living in fear, and when I was recommended by a mentor, go back to the Gospels and read them again, and stay reading them until you understand Jesus' version of his own gospel, not just by what he said, but by who he hung out with and how he lived. Then go back to Paul's epistles, and when you read them again, after you get the Jesus sense of life and love, Paul's writings will change. And you'll see the grace of God, but simply the reminder that if how you live your life doesn't match how you talk about who you think you are in life, that it's time to get before God, admit that you're not there, and let the Holy Spirit within you make the changes. Paul's constantly saying, walk in the Spirit and you will not fulfill the desires of the flesh. We try to conquer pornography. We try to conquer alcoholism. We try to conquer this and that, and fix these things with our programs. And they're not going to be fixed by programs. Because the only thing that causes us to wander into unholiness and selfish activities and selfish expressions is our selfishness and our lack of a genuine affection for God Himself. And actually, God is a joyous, loving, wonderful, perfect in every relationship God. He's not a bad father or a bad mother. He's the best father, the best mother. He's the best sibling. He's the best friend. And we can actually be joined to Him, as in a marriage. He's the best mate. So if we spend our time, instead of cowering in fear of His retribution against our inability to act selflessly like Jesus, and rather we're focusing on, wow, He loves me enormously. Wow, I want to love Him back enormously. The more I love God, just like the more I actually love my bride or most significant others, the sweeter the things are that I do for them. So I don't prefer a pastor that goes to either extreme and all lovey-dovey and God doesn't care about what you're doing and He never has a problem with your sin and just, live like a heathen calling yourself a Christian. Nor do I want to fear this God, and the beginning of wisdom is through a healthy fear and respect of God. But rather, I want this to be sweeter than my most significant other relationship on earth. And so, ordering my life by obedience alone is like applying Band-Aids to a serious wound. However, the main thing is to be loving. Love is the healing balm of deep wounds. Sinless living is a byproduct of loving. Sinless loving. Selfless loving. So I pursue love with a passion and a vengeance. This is Bob Clarkson. Think about it. That's so.